When her name finally lights up your phone after days, weeks, maybe months of silence, something happens inside you that you can't fully explain. Your chest tightens, your pulse spikes, your mind stops. And in that split second, you're no longer the man you became during the silence. You're the man she once walked away from. Most men don't realize it. But this is the most dangerous moment of the entire connection. Not the moment she left, not the silence, but the moment she comes back. Because how you respond right now doesn't just decide where this conversation goes, it decides who you are. And here's the truth nobody tells you. When she reaches out after silence, she's not giving you a second chance. She's giving you a test of your growth, your stability, and the strength of your emotional backbone. This isn't about what you say. It's about what your energy reveals. A man who reacts instantly shows her he hasn't changed. A man who pauses, breathes, and responds from clarity instead of craving. That man resets the entire dynamic without saying a single clever line. In this video, I'm going to take you through the exact blueprint of how a man of true Stoic masculinity responds when she reappears. How he protects his peace, holds his frame, and shows her without force, without performance, that the silence didn't break him, it built him. If you're ready to stop reacting and start leading, then stay exactly where you are. Because what you learn today will change every future interaction you ever have with a woman who returns after pulling away. Let's begin. When a woman breaks her silence after days or weeks of distance, most men think the moment is about her, what she wants, what she's thinking, what she's planning. But the truth is far more revealing. The moment is actually about you. It exposes the deepest parts of your emotional wiring, the parts you usually hide even from yourself. Before your mind analyzes the message, before you interpret her tone, before you try to read between the lines, your body reacts. A surge hits your nervous system, a flash of adrenaline, a spike of dopamine, a rush of relief you didn't ask for but can't stop. It happens before logic, before self-respect, before clarity, and that split second reveals more about your inner world than anything she could ever say. Most men don't recognize this initial rush for what it really is. They mistake it for excitement, hope, or attraction. But underneath it is something deeper, emotional dependence that's been waiting quietly for a moment of validation. This is why you feel that instant gravitational pull toward your phone. It's why your brain starts firing old memories like clips from a movie you swore you were done watching. It's why your instinct is to respond immediately, as if your reply will determine whether she leaves again. Your biology is not reacting to her. It's reacting to the uncertainty she left behind, the unfinished story, the open loop, the emotional cliffhanger. Silence creates psychological tension, and when she finally breaks it, the tension releases not in your mind, but in your body. It feels like relief. It feels like hope. But it's actually a loss of grounding. This is the trap countless men fall into. They confuse emotional reaction with emotional truth. A reaction is instant. Truth is steady. A reaction is impulsive. Truth is deliberate. A reaction pulls you toward her. Truth pulls you back into yourself. The moment her message appears is not a romantic opportunity. It's a test of whether you're still anchored in your life or whether you drift the second she taps your screen. This is why the first instinct is always the biggest danger. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unfiltered. Instinct reveals your emotional center. And if that center is unstable, your entire response will come from fear instead of strength. A woman can sense that instability immediately. She doesn't need long paragraphs, voice notes, or confessions to know where you stand. Your timing alone tells her everything. Instant replies scream history, not growth. Instant reactions scream attachment, not self-possession. The moment her message appears on your screen, something inside you ignites before you even realize what's happening. Your pulse jumps. Your mind accelerates. Your chest tightens with a subtle rush that feels like excitement, but underneath it is something far more dangerous: reactivity. This is the exact moment where the strongest men separate themselves from everyone else. Not by replying cleverly, not by acting cold, but by pausing. The pause is not silence. The pause is not a game. The pause is self-control in its purest, most masculine form. Most men think the pause is a tactic, something you do to appear mysterious or raise your value. But the truth is far simpler and far deeper. The pause is the moment where your nervous system stops leading you, and you start leading yourself. Because your first impulse is never strength. Your first impulse is emotion, fear, craving, hope, relief, confusion. That's why replying instantly always feels good, but always reveals weakness. Instant responses come from the same place. All emotional mistakes come from the need to soothe yourself. A man who pauses does something radically different. He breaks the loop. He interrupts the instinct to chase certainty. He stops the emotional current long enough to return to center. When you pause, even for 60 seconds, something powerful happens inside you. Your breath slows down. Your thoughts settle. The emotional noise quiets just enough for your mind to come back online. You remember that you are not here to react, you are here to choose. And here's what women feel. Even when they don't consciously realize it, your timing reflects your grounding. She can sense instantly whether your reply comes from emotional hunger or from composure, from fear or from presence, from the boy inside you or from the man you're becoming. The pause allows you to show her the man. Stoic masculinity has always taught one principle: control the internal, not the external. Pausing is the embodiment of that principle. You can't control why she texted, when she texted, or what she wants, but you can control how you meet the moment. Now picture this. She writes, "Hey." Your body reacts. Your instinct screams, "Answer now, don't lose the chance." But instead of grabbing your phone, you put it face down. You breathe. You return to what you were doing, your work, your gym session, your routine, not to manipulate her, but to stabilize yourself. 30 minutes pass. Your mind is clear again. Your emotions have landed. Now, the man responds, not the impulse. Women can feel that difference through a single line of text: the timing, the tone, The energy, it all changes when your reply comes from composure rather than craving. This is why the pause is power, not because it makes her chase, but because it makes you sovereign. The pause is the first act of strength, the first signal of boundaries, the first proof that you are not controlled by attention, uncertainty, or desire. If you can master the pause, every chapter that follows becomes effortless. Before you even think about crafting a response, there's one place you must look that most men never dare to examine: your inner state. Because the truth is simple but brutal. You don't respond to her message. You respond to your emotional condition at the moment you read it. If your inner world is shaky, your reply will be shaky. If you're longing, your words will leak longing. If you're afraid, your tone will expose it instantly. Women may not notice every word you say, but they always feel the emotional energy behind it. And the man who doesn't check himself before replying unknowingly hands over all his power. This chapter is where you stop that. Are you responding from need or from clarity when she reaches out after silence? Your mind automatically creates a story, a fantasy, where everything is suddenly fixed, forgiven, and restored. If you're not grounded, that story becomes the lens through which you interpret her message. That's how men fall back into the same dynamic they swore they'd never repeat. So, before a single word leaves your fingertips, ask yourself the 3 internal questions every man must face. 1. Am I hoping this message saves me from feeling lonely? If the answer is yes, pause longer. That's not clarity. That's emotional hunger wearing a mask. Responding from loneliness always leads you into the same cycle you overgive. She withdraws, and the imbalance repeats. A stoic man does not let emptiness decide his next move. 2. Am I assuming her message means everything has changed? One simple hey does not erase weeks of silence. It doesn't erase patterns. It doesn't erase history. Your mind naturally wants to fill in the gaps with what you wish to be true. But assumption is the enemy of strength. A grounded man evaluates reality, not fantasy. Before you reply, strip away the story. See the message for what it is: information, not transformation. 3. If a random acquaintance sent this, would I feel this excited? If the answer is no, then your emotional reaction isn't about the message. It's about attachment, craving, unfinished emotions. That's not a place to respond from. That's a place to breathe through before you act. Stoic principle: control the internal, not the external. You cannot control why she messaged you. You cannot control what she's thinking. You cannot control whether she stays or disappears again. But you can control your internal state. And that internal state determines everything that follows: tone, timing, energy, boundaries, direction. A man who leads his emotions leads the interaction. A man who is led by his emotions loses the interaction before it begins. The goal of this chapter is not to suppress emotion, it's to separate emotion from action. When your reply comes from self-possession rather than self-doubt, she feels the difference instantly. You don't sound eager. You don't sound nervous. You don't sound like you've been waiting for this moment. You sound grounded, present, clear. That energy alone resets the entire dynamic. Do this right. And by the time you reply, you're not reacting to her anymore. You're responding from your center, and that is the place where masculine influence begins. When a woman reaches out after silence, most men make the same fatal mistake. They assume her message is a reunion. They treat a simple "hey" as if it's an emotional homecoming, a promise, a fresh start. But a stoic masculine man thinks differently. He doesn't project meaning onto her words. He reads intent, because the truth is painfully simple when she comes back. She's not offering commitment, she's offering information. And your power lies in understanding what that information reveals. Every return carries the imprint of the dynamic she left with. If she was inconsistent before, that inconsistency follows her back. If she disappeared out of fear, that fear still lingers. If she only reached out when she needed attention, that pattern hasn't magically evaporated. A message doesn't reset the past. It reflects it. Too many men rush to rebuild closeness without recognizing they're rushing straight back into the same emotional architecture that collapsed the connection in the first place. The difference between men who repeat the cycle and men who break it is the ability to read what her return actually means. Women typically come back for one of three reasons, and each one carries a different emotional temperature. Some return for validation. They simply want to check if the door is still open, if you're still available, if they can still feel desirable in your eyes. Their messages are vague, casual, and low effort. A "hey," a meme, a random comment that doesn't acknowledge the silence. They're not coming back to rebuild. They're coming back to reassure themselves. Others return out of instinct. They aren't trying to play games. But their emotions have become intense enough that they need to test your stability. These women step back not because they've lost interest, but because they're overwhelmed by how much interest they actually feel. When they reach out again, they observe very closely your timing, your tone, your emotional balance. They're not looking for perfection. They're looking for a man who doesn't collapse the moment she reappears. And then there are the rare, genuine returns. These are the women who come back with clarity, softness, and accountability. They acknowledge the distance. They show vulnerability. And they communicate intent instead of confusion. They aren't fishing for reassurance or checking whether you're still orbiting them. They're opening a real door. No games. No tests. No ambiguity. Just honesty. The challenge for men is that all three returns can look similar at the surface. The words might be the same, but the energy behind them is completely different. That's why your job is not to react to what she typed, it's to observe how she typed it, why she typed it, and what emotional pattern her timing exposes. Is her message warm or hollow? Does her energy pull toward you or drift around you? Is this curiosity, boredom, or sincerity? Women may not always communicate intent verbally, but they communicate emotionally with perfect precision if you're paying attention. This is where a stoic lens becomes essential. A message is not a promise. A message is not an apology. A message is not a commitment. A message is simply information. Your role is to read that information without projecting fantasies onto it. A grounded man doesn't assume, he evaluates. He doesn't chase meaning, he extracts meaning. He doesn't fall into the dynamic she brings, he adjusts his frame to see hers clearly. When you stop interpreting her return through the lens of desire or fear, and start reading it through the lens of reality, everything changes. You no longer cling to the past. You no longer idealize the silence. You no longer jump back into old patterns. You stand steady, observing her intention before you reveal yours, because the man who understands why she's truly reaching out is the man who decides what happens next. The moment she returns after silence, the emotional frame between you loses its shape. The rhythm you once shared is broken. The familiarity that used to guide your conversations has dissolved. Most men panic when they feel this shift. They rush to fill the gaps, recreate the warmth, and prove they're still the same man she once connected with. But that desperation only solidifies her role as the emotional leader. A stoic, masculine man never allows that. He doesn't follow her energy. He sets the tone. Leading the frame isn't about control or manipulation. It's about direction. It's about deciding the emotional pace of the connection instead of surrendering to the one she brings. It's about showing her, without theatrics or attitude, that you are the emotional center, not a follower scrambling to stabilize what she destabilized. When she returns, the temptation to slip into old patterns is strong. You want to be warm, familiar, reassuring, expressive. You want her to feel the closeness you once had. But understand this, the moment you try to recreate the past, you lose the leverage the silence gave you. Growth doesn't look backward, it looks steady, grounded, forward-facing. That's why the first rule of leading the frame is simple: do not rush. A man who moves slowly is a man who owns the tempo. A man who responds calmly is a man who owns the emotional weight. The masculine leads by pacing, not chasing. Your words don't need to be poetic. Your tone doesn't need to be cold. It simply needs to be neutral, present, aware, collected. When you respond from neutrality, you pull the interaction into your grounding, not her volatility. This is where the true art begins. A grounded man doesn't dodge the silence she created. He brings it into the conversation with calm curiosity, not pressure, not punishment, curiosity, because curiosity is the cleanest way to lead. It's not confrontational, and it's not needy. It simply reveals the truth. One question embodies this principle better than any other. What made you want to reach out, delivered gently, naturally, and without emotional weight? This question does what most men are afraid to do. It forces clarity, not through confrontation, but through direction. With 8 simple words, you reclaim leadership of the dynamic. You acknowledge the silence without resentment. You invite honesty without force. You position yourself as the evaluator, not the one being evaluated. Her response will tell you everything you need to know. If she avoids the question, jokes around it, or deflects responsibility, she's not here to rebuild anything. She's here to see if you're still available. But if her response carries vulnerability, sincerity, or accountability. The energy shifts. She steps into your frame instead of pulling you into hers. Leading the frame also means refusing to mirror her instability. If she comes in warm 1 minute and detached the next, you stay steady. If she tries to create emotional spikes, mixed signals, vague comments, nostalgic references, you don't bite. You don't chase highs or fear lows. The masculine doesn't move with emotional weather, it becomes the climate. And here's the paradox: the more stable you become, the more she relaxes into you. Women don't trust men who react emotionally to every shift. They trust men who can hold emotional space without collapsing. Your calm isn't just attractive, it's magnetic. It's the energy that makes a woman feel safe enough to step closer, not out of testing, but out of trust. Leading the frame is not about being dominant. It's about being directional. It's about setting the emotional tone through who you are, not what you say. When you guide the interaction from grounded strength, she feels the difference immediately. She senses the shift. She recognizes the presence she always hoped you would step into. And if she came back for the right reasons, she'll follow that presence without hesitation. When she finally reaches out after silence, most men make the same fatal mistake. They respond with their emotions instead of their standards. That's the moment everything collapses, not because they say the wrong words, but because they say them from the wrong place. A man who lacks containment becomes transparent, predictable, and emotionally exposed. A man with containment becomes unreadable in the most attractive way. He communicates without leaking. He speaks without spilling. He responds without giving away his center. Containment is not coldness. It's composure. It's the discipline to feel deeply while choosing your output consciously. It's the quiet mastery of emotional restraint, not repression, but command. When your emotions run the conversation, you lose the frame before the conversation even begins. When your presence leads the conversation, she feels it immediately. The masculine collapses when it starts explaining, confessing, or compensating. That's why your first rule is simple: do not emotionally dump. You don't owe her paragraphs about how her silence affected you. You don't owe her reassurance that you've missed her. You don't owe her vulnerability she hasn't earned. Emotional honesty is powerful, but only when it is grounded, not when it's discharged out of fear. Your second rule: do not over-validate. When a man responds with excessive warmth, eagerness, or enthusiasm, it signals that her absence didn't shake him, but her return did. And that subtle imbalance kills polarity instantly. Women don't consciously articulate this, but they feel it in their nervous system. They feel when a man is responding from a place of longing instead of leadership. Containment also means refusing to force the direction of the interaction. You don't pressure her to explain herself. You don't demand answers. You don't ask for promises. You don't turn the moment into emotional negotiations. Pressure is what weak men apply when they don't trust themselves. Containment is what strong men carry when they know they are the prize. So what does a contained man actually say? Very little, but every word is controlled. His tone is neutral. His pacing is slow. And his message is grounded. He doesn't jump into deep intimacy. He doesn't resurrect the past. He doesn't try to fix anything. He simply acknowledges her presence with clarity and moves from steadiness instead of excitement. A text that reads calm, collected, and steady communicates more masculinity than any poetic sentence ever could. Stoic containment is about holding space without filling it. You don't try to make her comfortable. You don't try to prove anything. You don't shapeshift into her expectations. You let the silence breathe inside the conversation. You allow her to feel your measured responses, not rushed, not emotional, simply present. That's what creates the tension she actually trusts. And beneath it all lies the deepest truth. A woman cannot feel safe with a man whose emotions control him. She can only trust a man who controls himself. Containment is that trust made visible. When you anchor yourself before you speak, when you choose presence over impulse, when you stop yourself from reacting emotionally, you communicate a message she feels before she reads it. I am not here to be pulled by your silence or saved by your attention. I am here because I choose to be. That is masculine containment, not a performance, but a state, not a tactic, but an identity. And once you embody it, every interaction shifts in your favor, not because you said the perfect thing, but because you said nothing you didn't mean. Silence isn't just something she gives you. It's something life gives you. And if you're a man who's been through it, you already know silence doesn't feel empty. It feels revealing. It exposes the noise you didn't know was living inside you. It forces you to confront how much of your mental stability was tied to someone else's attention. And it shows you, sometimes brutally, whether your peace is self-generated or borrowed. When she pulls away, the first sensation is rarely clarity. It's turbulence. The mind races. The chest tightens. The nervous system scans for danger. But once the initial storm settles, something unexpected happens. You begin to breathe again. The compulsive checking of your phone fades. The emotional spikes flatten. Your thoughts become cleaner. You start to feel the weight lifting from your shoulders, not because she's gone, but because the constant emotional anticipation is gone. This is the moment most men misinterpret. They think they're moving on, when, in reality, they're rediscovering themselves. Silence becomes a boundary that protects you from the version of yourself that was chasing emotional closure. It becomes a mirror reflecting your true state, a man who was giving too much, hoping too much, surrendering too much of his internal peace. The biggest lesson silence gives you is this peace is not something someone else can return to you. It's something you rebuild within yourself. There's a reason you felt more grounded during the distance. Without realizing it, you shifted back into your own rhythm. You woke up for yourself, not for her notifications. You worked for your own goals, not for the emotional payoff you hoped would come later. You lived without waiting for a message to validate your day. That's not loneliness. That's power. And when she reaches out again, this is the crossroads every man faces. Do you surrender that peace just because she reappeared? Or do you protect it as the foundation of the man you've become? Most men break here. They rush back, collapse into old patterns, and trade their peace for a hit of emotional familiarity. They think reconnecting means returning to who they were before the silence. But returning to that version of yourself is not love, it's regression. A Stoic man receives her message through a different lens. He doesn't see her return as victory. He sees it as information. He evaluates the energy she brings. He checks whether her presence stabilizes his life or disrupts it. He understands that not every message deserves access. And not every return deserves a restart. A woman can reach out for 100 reasons: curiosity, boredom, insecurity, validation, or genuine desire. But only one question truly matters. Does letting her back in protect your peace or disturb it? Your peace is not a luxury. It's your power source. It is where your clarity, your standards, and your masculine presence come from. And any connection that costs you your center is too expensive. No matter how much you want it to work, the silence taught you a truth you can't unknow. You are better, stronger, and clearer when your emotional world is anchored within yourself, not in someone's responses, not in someone's timing, not in someone's inconsistency. So, when she returns, the question is not, how do I keep her? It's, does she fit the life I built while she was gone? And if the answer threatens your peace, then the silence wasn't a pause. It was a warning. And protecting your peace now is the highest expression of strength you can show, not to her, but to yourself. When she reaches out after silence, most men panic and think there's only one question to answer: what do I say back? But a Stoic man sees something different. He understands that he's not responding to a message, he's responding to a pattern, to energy, to intention. He knows that not every message deserves enthusiasm, not every return deserves access, and not every woman who reappears deserves the same version of himself she once knew. That's why a grounded man never sends emotional paragraphs, never over-explains, never dives headfirst into old dynamics. Instead, he chooses from only 3 clean responses, 3 directions that maintain his dignity, protect his peace, and reveal the strength she's subconsciously looking for. These responses aren't scripts, they're postures, energetic positions that separate a man who reacts from a man who leads. The first response is simple acknowledgement paired with space. This is the option for when her message carries uncertainty messages that feel casual, vague, or emotionally light. You're not rude. You're not cold. You're simply neutral. Your tone signals that her message didn't shake your world, didn't speed up your pulse, didn't resurrect the emotional dependency she once had access to. This kind of response makes her confront the question she's been avoiding. Does he still feel the same? Or has he changed? That question alone shifts the energy back toward your center. The second response is a slow opening, not rushing, not collapsing, not pretending the past didn't happen. This is for the moments when she shows sincerity, real accountability, emotional clarity, or an intentional step forward. You open the door, but you open it like a man, not like someone desperate to be let inside again. Your pace is measured, grounded, observant. You're not rebuilding what used to exist. You're evaluating something new. And she feels the difference instantly. A man who opens slowly teaches her that intimacy with him is not a given. It is earned through consistency, not granted through nostalgia. The third response is walking away entirely. This isn't revenge. It's not bitterness. It's self-respect in motion. Sometimes her return is wrapped in chaos, in manipulation, in the same inconsistency that drained you before. Sometimes her message is nothing more than an emotional check-in to see if you're still available as a backup plan. And a man who knows his worth will not entertain a doorway that leads back into a cycle he already healed from. His silence is not punishment, it's closure. It's the moment he chooses himself rather than reopening the wound. What makes these three responses powerful is not the words, it's the clarity behind them. A man who chooses instead of reacting becomes unpredictable in the most attractive way. He shows her that she no longer controls the rhythm. She no longer sets the emotional temperature. She no longer decides the pace of the connection. And women feel that shift more deeply than anything you could say. Because in the end, you're not responding to her message. You're responding to who you became during the silence. And when your reply comes from that version of you, calm, centered, self-led, everything about the dynamic changes. She doesn't feel a man waiting. She feels a man choosing. By the time she reaches out again, the real transformation isn't in what she says. It's in who you have become since the silence began. Most men don't realize this. They respond from the same emotional posture she left them in. Trying to prove, impress, reconnect, or revive something that died quietly the moment she pulled away. But a man who has grown uses this moment differently. He doesn't respond from memory. He responds from evolution. This chapter is about that version of you, the one forged in the quiet days she wasn't there. The one who stopped checking his phone every few minutes. The one who reclaimed his routines, sharpened his goals, rebuilt his structure, and remembered who he is without her attention. When she returns, that version of you is the one who answers, not the boy who feared losing her, not the man who overgave, but the grounded masculine presence you've been sculpting in the background. Responding as the man you've become means you no longer chase clarity. You embody it. You don't ask her why she disappeared. You observe whether her actions align with consistency now. You don't rush to rebuild intimacy. You assess if she is worthy of entering the life you've built. You don't try to rekindle old emotions. You evaluate whether she fits the chapter you're writing, not the chapter you've closed. Most men break at this stage because they treat her return like a victory, a sign that they won. But in masculine psychology, the return is not the win. The win is whether you remain centered when she reappears, whether you hold your frame when her presence shifts the emotional air, whether you respond from the identity you built, not the insecurity you escaped. Think about it. A man who has truly grown does not fear losing her a second time. He understands that her silence was never rejection, it was revelation. It revealed her patterns, her inconsistency, her emotional management. It showed him the difference between temporary attention and real intimacy. And that clarity becomes the foundation of how he responds now. He doesn't prove he's changed, he shows it through pace, tone, and emotional neutrality. He doesn't reveal the chaos he survived, he reveals the peace he built. He doesn't try to recreate old chemistry, he creates new standards she must now meet if she wants access to his energy again. Women feel this shift instantly. They don't need long conversations to sense the difference. The moment your energy is no longer centered on her approval, everything about the dynamic transforms. You become unpredictable in the healthiest way, not unstable, but ungraspable. She can't pull you the way she used to. She can't trigger you the way she used to. She can't rely on your instant emotional availability the way she used to. And that's when attraction shifts in your favor, not because you're withholding, but because you're whole. Responding as the man you've become means your value no longer fluctuates with her behavior. It doesn't rise when she texts or fall when she withdraws. It stays steady, anchored in the life you've built outside of her. That steadiness is the masculine gravity women crave. Not the man who answers instantly. Not the man who pours out emotion. Not the man who clings to old stories. But the man who can look at her return and calmly ask himself, does this align with who I am now or who I used to be? The man she left cannot answer that question. The man you've become can. Most men think the test begins the moment she comes back. They think her message, her tone, her timing, and her intentions are the things being evaluated. But the truth almost no man realizes is that the real test was never her return. The real test is you. Because when she reaches out again, she's not assessing whether she still wants you. She's assessing whether you still want you. She's seeing whether the silence changed you or exposed you, whether you grew or simply waited, whether you built a life or paused one. She's not just looking at your reply, she's looking at your evolution. The return is simply a mirror. What it reflects is entirely up to you. If you've grown, that growth shows in your presence, not your performance. It shows in the steadiness of your energy, the pacing of your responses, the clarity in your boundaries. It shows in the quiet, unspoken truth that your life stayed in motion with or without her. And women feel that truth instantly, not through your words, but through the absence of need behind them. If you haven't grown, that shows too. It shows in the rush, the eagerness, the emotional overflow. It shows in the way you grasp for clarity or chase reassurance. It shows in the way you speak like a man desperate for a second chance instead of a man evaluating whether a second chance is deserved. This is why the moment she comes back,